The sun is shining, the birds are chirping, the bacon is sizzling. Welcome to the Daily Swole.
Welcome everyone to episode 103 of the Daily Mother Swole. As usual, I'm going to just start flexing and stop saying the name of this show because it's like, welcome to the Daily Obvious, almost. You never know what to expect when you watch the Daily Swole live at its best. There you go. Float those hearts on Periscope, and you can throw a couple busker hearts my way. I wouldn't mind that either. Let's talk today about how to improve the mind-muscle connection. Now, what is the mind-muscle connection? Well, you have the brain and the spinal cord. And the brain and the spinal cord control everything in the entire body. It regulates, impulses, especially when it comes to movement. Let's just talk specifically about movement because that's what my expertise is in, for one, and that's what we really care about. We're talking about connecting the mind to the muscles. So the brain and the spinal cord trigger muscle action and also receives information from the muscles. So if you did not know that already, not only does the brain and the spinal cord send information to the muscles, as in what to do, like to contract and so forth, but it also receives feedback from neurons, from cells, from receptors in the muscle tissue and from the outside environment to interpret quickly and then effect a response. So you have this highway, in a sense, if you want to think about it that way, to the brain and spinal cord between the muscles. So you have this connection. Now the connection, what it really is the brain and the spinal cord triggering neurons, and they're called motor neurons. So it's specifically cells that their job, what they do. And there are trillions of cells, quadrillion, however many cells in the entire body. There's tons of them. But these cells specifically are cells that trigger muscle contraction. They're called motor neurons, motor, movement, neurons, nerve cells. So these motor neurons fire the muscle fibers. That's their job. That's what they're paired up with. Now, you want to have proper communication with your brain and these motor neurons because the brain is what's going to be triggering these motor neurons. If the brain, let's say, loses the phone number of these motor neurons or loses connection with the motor neurons, those muscles aren't going to fire. It makes sense, right? If the brain doesn't trigger that motor neuron, the muscle fibers that motor neuron controls ain't going to contract. That kind of makes sense. That seems, all right, well, if it's not working, it's not working, right? What happens is because of this feedback. Now, I prefaced this with talking about how the muscle and the body gives feedback to the brain and the spinal cord. Because the brain and the spinal cord, let's talk about the brain, I'll just simplify it, is receiving information from the muscle about being lengthened, about being in a seated position, for example. Let's say the glutes. Let's talk about the glutes because that's the big one. When you're sitting down, the glutes are lengthened. There's pressure on the glutes, kind of like foam rolling or massage. They get inhibited. They get shut down. So the brain is receiving information from these muscle cells that it's not being used. That's not being used. It's being lengthened. It's being shut down. There's less blood flow. There's constant pressure, which causes inhibition in the muscle fiber. It's like a massage. Just that pressure is kind of petrifying the muscle and that it doesn't need to be used. So the brain kind of says, all right, forget the glutes. I mean, this is very layman's term. This is basic. But pretty much the brain says, all right, I guess we're not using the glutes that much anymore. It doesn't mean the glutes don't work at all. It doesn't mean they don't connect to the bones the way they did. It doesn't mean you don't have an ass muscle. That's not what it means. What it means is that the brain gets feedback about what you do during your day. The brain is getting information based on what your body is doing. So if you're sitting down a lot, the information the brain is receiving is that we don't need these muscles. We don't need these muscles. Now, let's say you work out a lot. You do a lot of yoga, you do a lot of stretching, you do a lot of activation. And one day you're just like, I'm tired. I just feel like hanging out. It's a Saturday. I don't have anything to do. I just need one day off just to, recover. You're not going to screw your body up by sitting on the couch and watching Netflix just one day or just chilling one day. It's not like, oh my God, it's going to shut down. Forget the glutes. One day doesn't do it. I'm talking about repetitive movement patterns. People that sit down 9 to 5 every day for 30 years, even for 5 years, even for a year, but for an extended period of time, over and over and over again. This repeated pattern of inactivity, this repeated pattern of lack of movement. This is what causes this lack of communication from the brain to the muscle. Like an office job, right? Like a cubicle, like you're sitting in your car. Some people not only have an office job, but they drive in a car an hour each way. So they're in a car for an hour or two every day sitting down, and then they're in a cubicle sitting down, and they go to lunch and sit down, and they come home, they're tired because they're mentally drained from doing something they don't like to do. They come home after driving for an hour and they sit down and they watch TV or they sit down and eat. They're sitting down all the time. So not only are they not working out, they're just sitting down 90% of their day. So those muscles pretty much say, well, we're not needed. So they shut down. It doesn't mean you're not going to be able to walk. And that's because multiple muscles are used to walk. The hamstrings, adductors are used to walk. There's motion from the hip flexors, from the gluteus medius and minimus. I mean, there's other muscles, the quadriceps, the rectus femoris. There's other muscles that provide motility that take over, that help out the glutes on a regular basis. They're always working. Now, the glutes are the primary mover of the hips, so if the glutes aren't working, you're already jeopardized. The reason why people have very tight hip flexors, why they pull their groin a lot, they tear their hamstring, they get very tight other muscles because of the imbalance that gets caused in the hips because of the lack of activation from the glutes. The glutes shut down, the hamstrings start working too hard, they get very tight, they start pulling and tearing. That's why people that have injuries, generally, if you have back pain or back injury, you throw your back out. How many people do you know that just throws their back out once? Doesn't kind of happen like once or twice a year, or it happens regularly, or, oh, I threw my back out again, or I pull my hamstring again, or I twisted my ankle again. Usually there's a pattern of injury that relates to a pattern of imbalance and compensation. If you have an injury that recurs over and over again, there's something wrong. There's something that's not lined up. There's something that your brain and your body is not in sync with, and it's causing repetitive injury. One, you're doing activities that just aren't good for you and you're just increasing your risk in general. It doesn't matter how healthy you are. If you're just slamming yourself around, you're bound to get hurt or inflammation or something's going to get hurt. But if you're just like doing your life and you just, bam, your back goes out, or oh, your knee, or oh, my hamstring again, or my ankle, there's chances are there's some instability, there's some compensation, there's some imbalance. A bodybuilder I work with threw his back out moving a 100-pound battery. Yeah, now you can throw your back out by lifting it wrong and just by losing focus for 1 second, but a bodybuilder should be able to lift a 100-pound battery. A lot of times it's people that just don't pay attention that moment. They don't brace themselves for a deadlift when they pick a 100-pound battery up. They're like, oh, battery, ow, my back. When you're doing a 500-pound deadlift, your belt is on, your stomach is in, you're drawing, your back is flat, and you're focusing everything on keeping everything tight. So a lot of times, sometimes people can hurt themselves just by losing focus and not picking something else up properly. But yeah, it could also have been just like, the straw that broke the camel's back. He's probably as big as a camel too, but sometimes things just kind of hold on for dear life, and then that right moment, the right time, the right torque, pop, and then it's done. So you have to be aware what you're doing on a regular basis. So I want you to reflect, and we're going to talk about this again. I've talked about this before with activation. On my YouTube channel, there are activation exercises for the glutes, because most of you're probably compensating starting from the hip, because if you have hip compensations, if you're not communicating with the body in the hip region, it's going to affect your upper body and lower body, because the core stems from the hips above and below. Go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Swolenormous. I'll say that again, youtube.com/Swolenormous. Swolenormous is my username on YouTube. Go there. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I have about 400 videos. I have a lot of exercise videos. I have live videos that I film on Periscope that I edit for YouTube. And I also, what's up, Michael? And I also I have some from before, single leg squat. I have the hip bridge and I have the plank. Those are a couple fantastic exercises that are very important for you to do on a regular basis to activate those glutes. So if you have a poor mind-muscle connection, if you have an imbalance because your body is just receiving information from your hips, from your glutes that they're not needed, you have to remind your brain of the glutes phone number, if that makes sense. So you lose communication. It's like back in the day when you had to like remember someone's phone number, when you had a phone book. You had to, pick, you had to know their number. If you lost the number, it's like, well, I guess I'm not friends with that person anymore. You guys remember that? Some of you aren't old enough. I mean, I was barely old enough, but if you lost someone's phone number, you're kind of like, okay, guess we're not friends. It's like, I guess that person doesn't exist in my life anymore. It's crazy. It's crazy. And it's sad because I used to have one of those Palm Pilots, right? Palm Pilots. And I remember I was in the gym and it fell out of my fanny pack because you needed one because you had like, basic cell phone and it fell out and it hit the ground. I'm like, oh shoot, it wasn't broken, but it all erased. So like all my clients when I first moved down here, I bet someone think I'm like a huge dick. So if you're watching right now, I apologize. Contact me because I lost your number and that was it. That was it. Google wasn't bumping the way it is today. Not everything was so I lost you and you died in my life and I miss you. Yeah, no one knows anyone's number. Like one number. Yeah, I just remember like I love if my phone hit the ground, I was like, so like if a client didn't show up for a session, I just never talked to them again. I didn't have their number. No, not every situation. I looked up as many as I could and I hunted them down. But it's just funny how like, now it's, you break your phone, you throw it in the ocean. It's like, you get a new phone. It syncs up to some bird in the sky, some satellite, and Google's like, here are your numbers. So anyhow, but that's the communication. That's a little tangent, but that's the communication I'm talking about. You want to remind your brain of your glutes phone number. So you need to activate it. Now, activate it usually takes isolated exercise where you're usually working one joint. You're not doing a lunge or a squat. You're doing an isolated where you're only focusing on the glutes. You might see me do some of those lateral tube walking, band tube walking. I'm going to do another video, like an exercise vid for YouTube soon on that one. But the single leg squat and the hip bridge, the supine hip bridge, even the plank, on my YouTube channel, my exercise video list from a month or so ago, those are going to be isolated exercises, are going to activate and stimulate the glutes so that when you do squats, lunges, when you go through your day, those glutes are firing. You're pretty much reminding the body, do it like this, do it like this. Don't forget the glutes, don't forget the glutes, don't forget the glutes. Hi, Mary. So remind the brain of your glutes phone number, activate those muscle tissues, because then once you activate the glutes, once you activate them and you integrate them into lunges and squat movements, you will reduce your risk, your compensation risk from those movement patterns, and you're going to perpetuate yourself and reduce your risk of injury. You're going to increase your strength. You're going to reduce your your pain risk, just everything. So those chronic injuries will just go away. I know. I'm sure it happens to a lot of people. But don't take me seriously. Don't take me seriously. People here know not to take me too seriously. So I will save for a few minutes after on Busker and Periscope and take some Q&A. Remember, go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Swolenormous. Also, Mary, you can check it out too because Eli has his own playlist on my YouTube channel. So if you missed the What's Your Story on Busker last night, I was on it and so was Eli. And I posted some new videos, some new Eli trending news. There's some updates with the Olympics and society. So at your own risk, you can watch those Eli videos on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Swolenormous. And I'll stay for a few minutes after to do some Q&A if you have any questions. Olga here? No, Olga's not here as far as I know. People in Periscope, everyone knows Olga. So Olga and Eli, it's going down. It's going down. If you don't know, now you know. So thank you everyone for joining me for episode 103 of The Daily Mother Swole. Ooh, I'm going to get arrested for packing heat. See you tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern time for episode 104 of The Daily Swole. Peace out. I'll stay for a few minutes. Later, remember, you can also catch this on SoundCloud and iTunes and Stitcher if you want to catch the podcast. So if you missed a lot of these episodes, you can't watch it, you're in the car a lot, check out my SoundCloud and iTunes. You can catch every single episode up until now. Peace out. See you tomorrow.